Good evening, everyone. William Munn here from the Hope County Democratic Party. Happy to bring along my good friend Tyson Moy and our second vice chair. Let me make sure I get this right. The Hope County Democrat. No, oh Lord, let me start over. The North Carolina Democratic Party, not Hope County, but the North Carolina Democratic Party. Dr. Kimberly Hardy. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Tyson, how's it going, man? How the Cowboys doing free agency this week? What y'all do this week?
Well, so as you know, William, the only person we've signed is our long snapper. So, really everything's all in for this year. What's really hurting me today, though, is UNC lost to Alabama last night. My wife did grad school at Alabama, and the first words out of her mouth and my toddler's mouth this morning were Roll Tide. And that hurt, and I wasn't ready for that. The game started way past my bedtime, so I woke up to some bad news, unfortunately. How are the Eagles?
In any other world, we would not speak. I'm a Duke fan, so we're going to go into tonight's game hoping that all things would go well. But I'm not one of those folk who relish in my rivalries, downfall. So I'm not cheering that Carolina lost. I only cheer when Carolina loses to Duke. That's about it. That's where I live with that. Dr. Hardy, we thank you so much. We are in the throes and truly monumental, but at the same time, weird election season. And it's just, I've had a chance to talk to you a couple of times, and it has just been so, refreshing to hear your people first approach to engaging voters, engaging communities. Something we talked about was the importance leading with hope, leading with a vision, leading with what the future can be rather than just facts and numbers and statistics, very dry and banal kinds of things. I just want to give you a chance to say a little bit about yourself, how you landed in Fayetteville State University. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about Dr. Kimberly Hardy.
Okay, so let's see. Well, I do love college basketball, but I have no dog in this fight because I'm really a football girl. And so as a Buckeye, I can certainly understand how heartbreaking it is, Tyson, to hear Roll Tide. I can't stand that, but we don't hate anyone as much as we hate that little state up north. So
you've had a bad year then, haven't you?
Let's be
watching them go.
I thought we were friends. Friends don't ask friends about Buckeye losses to that little school up north. Nevertheless, so let's see a little bit about me. So I'm originally I was born in DC, but I was raised in Maryland. So
okay.
Right now I'm having a bit of a heartbreak in that space too, because of what happened with the bridge collapse in Baltimore.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that people are taking this opportunity of sadness and fear to turn it into political talking points on the right. Now, the most recent thing I've heard is that somehow the ship crashing into the bridge is a conspiracy of DEI and immigration, but whatever. What it really is an unfortunate tragedy, and our hearts are with those folks who have still not been recovered and all the people impacted, because there's victims all around. So the governor, Wes Moore, said that we are Baltimore strong, we are Maryland strong, and that's true. And so though my adopted home is North Carolina, I'm grieving for my home back in Maryland. While I was in Maryland, I did go to undergrad, and I got my bachelor's and my doctorate in social work at Morgan State University, HBCU.
Nice.
And I did my master's at, obviously, the Ohio State University. It's the only respectful way to say that. And all three of the degrees were in social work. So when you talk about the people first orientation to the way that I engage politics, that is where that comes from. But also a life of service from my parents. Both my parents were in law enforcement. My mom was a federal agent. My father was a police officer with DC police. So I have a lot of giving. They're military. All the men in my family were in the military. So service to community and country and neighbor is very important to me. I just grew up with that. How did I get here? So I was a school social worker for my whole professional career as a practitioner. And after I started seeing that the faces were changing, but the issues were not, that's when it became clear this is a systemic set of issues we're dealing with. That's when I went back and got the doctorate, because I thought legislators talked to academics to inform policy. And wow, is that not true all the time? So,
Right.
but nevertheless, I decided to become a generation of social workers to go out there and do the work in the trenches, but also to eventually inform policy from the academy. So I was on faculty at UConn when the women's basketball team had the longest streak in college basketball. It was amazing to watch those women do their thing till Stanford ended it all. And so I was there for a bunch of years. Then I went to about 4 years. And then I went literally across the street to University of St. Joseph, a smaller, more regional university, to help start their Master's of Social Work program. And coming from an HBCU, my dissertation advisor said, when it's time, and you'll know when it's time, that's when I want you to go teach at an HBCU. And I just knew it was time. And so FSU had a program that looked really amazing. My father's roots are in North Carolina in Ahoskie. And so I thought,
Oh, wow.
well, that's it. I'm going there. I've been here since 2016. I ran for office the first time in 2020 and unseated an incumbent. He was the only Democratic incumbent to lose that year. And so beat him. But that was in the 2020 election, which looks remarkably like the one we're in now. But let's hope that the outcome is remarkably different in terms of at the state level. And so now I am the second vice chair of the state party, helping to get all Democrats. I'm rooting for everybody blue to win on the basketball court and at the ballot box. So
I like that.
Well, that's
I love
perfect.
that.
Sort of start with something in the news that you already mentioned. The bridge collapse in Maryland, which, as you said, it's just an unbelievable tragedy. But the way that's already being politicized, I actually saw the mayor of Baltimore, on CNN and on Twitter, sort of calling out the fact that if you say that he's the DEI mayor, I believe his words were, just use the N-word next time and be done with it. Which is what they mean. I've had this conversation before. I lived in El Paso, Texas for 5 years and loved it there. But when I tell people I love, we lived in El Paso, I get El Paso. And it's just, they're saying, oh, El Paso, Mexicans. That's bad. And it's not. El Paso is an amazing city, great culture. Anyway, so what do you think is the most effective way when someone says something to that, the DEI is the new CRT, is the new Sharia law, is the new welfare queen, is the new, pick your dog whistle. What do you think is the most effective way to counter that messaging? And when you're talking to people who, are persuadable, what's the best way to focus back in on the tragedy, the policy, and the way forward?
So, anyone who has that kind of hatefulness in their rhetoric, I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to persuade them, right? There's a point at which, you can kind of get a sense sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
In Maryland, as well as in the political space, because I don't mind talking to persuadable unaffiliated voters and persuadable Republicans. And I've been able to persuade them because what you focus on is, like you said, the issue. Unaffiliated, for example, have taken a principled stance against partisanship. They don't like the fighting. They'll say, I just like the issues. I just want to focus on the issues. And so let's talk about that. Is this not a human tragedy? Does who the mayor is really have any connectedness to the thing that happened here? And it doesn't. And so when you start talking about loss of loved ones, somebody kissed somebody goodnight or, goodbye, because the gentleman on the bridge, they're working in the overnight hours. And so somebody's loved one didn't come home. That's not a political thing. That is a human issue. And so if you can appeal to people's humanity, I find that it's easier to do that when you can pull them apart from the pack. The echo chamber is loud. It is loud with them. And so if you can get them in a quiet space, pull them away from the pack, pull them away from the talking points and focus back in on the specific discrete issue, you tend to get a little bit more You even see this in these interviews that you'll see on YouTube videos where they're, oh, well, the reason I don't like such and such is because of the Bible said, and they're like, well, the Bible also said this thing. And they're like, and so so you can, watch their arguments fall apart. And some people will just be so tethered to that argument that, yeah, the mayor's right. Just say it. Just be like, I don't like him because he's black. Just say it, But I do think there are people for whom compassion can win the day if you just focus on the actual issue and listen, right? My mom used to say all the time, you'd have 2 ears and 1 mouth because you're supposed to listen more than you talk. And so ask them questions. I find that people's arguments that are rooted in that sort of thing, in talking points and rhetoric, fall apart pretty quickly when you say, can you explain that to me? Can you tell me a little bit more about it? What are you basing that on? There's a point at which they're just going to hit a wall. And that's when you kind of get in there and say, I think what we can both agree on is that this is a really terrible tragedy for a lot of people, and the state is going to be impacted by this economically for a long time, which is, of course, going to have a greater effect on the country. When we start breaking it down and getting past those talking points, I think that's doable, but you'll know when you're talking to a persuadable person.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that, what folk are trying to do is, on the extreme right, is normalize anti-black racism as like a normal everyday thing. Like, that's supposed to be how we feel. And then, like you said, if you start asking questions, it starts to fall apart really quickly when we're faced with, sadly, the economic and capitalist argument, but also the human loss component too. This shouldn't be a left versus right issue, and you can just feel the country lurch, or certain segments of the country lurching towards that space. Really, thank you. Appreciate that point. Would love your thoughts as we, small county of hope, begin to build towards this campaign season. What would you say to all our would-be volunteers, door knockers, strategists, party folk? What would you say to them that we need to do to position ourselves to get to those non-politicos, to people who are interested in, I'm sorry.
I said normal people, not
normal people. Yeah, not politicos. Yeah, how do we get to those folk? And I know we had a conversation about that earlier, and you shared some just really brilliant things, and I want the world to hear it. No, it really was. And we know, and it's not like we're going to leak out trade secrets. The other side's not going to do it because they don't care about human beings the way that we do. So what in your estimation, what would you tell all the good Democrats and unaffiliated who want to see a fantastic Hope County in North Carolina moving forward? How will we engage those voters?
So the first thing is, I'm going to start where you ended. And I said this to you earlier when we were talking, they're not voters until ballots are printed, right? Right now, they're just people who live in a community who really need some support, who want to find a sense of community within the party, or don't even, because they don't know that's a thing that we do, because all we do is show up at like 2 weeks before election cycles and just assume they're going to vote for Democrats. And I'm specifically talking about African American voters right now, but I think the same can be true on some level for like the broader regular person who is just kind of struggling to get through the day-to-day and is not really focused on politics and elections that are happening in November at the end of March. And so what I've told the chairs, I'm doing this 30 county tour of Eastern North Carolina. I've gone through the first 19 counties already. And what I have noticed is there's a lot of GOTV type activities that are unnecessary right now because we won't be GOTVing for the next few months. And so right now, what we need to do is engage with our neighbors as neighbors. So I like to say it's my job to think about elections all day. I'm supposed to be thinking about targets and door knocks and all that sort of stuff, but it's the county chairs. I see the county party's responsibility as constituent services. And so for me, it's about, meeting needs of people in your community. It's about giving people an opportunity to come together as a community. So I did a thing in December that I sent out to all the county chairs across the state called 7 Days of Service. And each day was a different focus. So it was either the, homeless or unsheltered population. Another day was the veterans. Another day was seniors. And I gave everybody here's some ideas of what you could do, because that's another thing. When all you ever needed to do for the constituents that were 70 to 100 turnout score is GOTV stuff. Well, then, you're not going to know what to do with the 7 days of service. So each day I gave people a breakdown of here are some activities that you could do. Here are some possible collaborators in your community with whom you could do those things. And here is some a checklist of things you can do to get the program off the ground. And then with people took pictures, I asked them to send it to me, and I posted it in the world. And I did it too. I made a lot of spaghetti, and we took it out in a deluge of a rainstorm, my son and I, and gave it out to people who were sleeping on the street that night. We baked cakes and cupcakes for first responders, for the police department and the fire department. We did a little bit of everything.
Oh, wow.
And so, but if you can't ask people to do a thing if you're not going to give them some support. So that's why I said, well, this is what you could do. And those are things that you can do in your community all the time. So I would say do more of that. I would encourage county parties to do more of that, to do more giving back to the community and being a resource and meeting the needs of the constituents in the area as people and neighbors and community members. In October and November, they will remember who it was that helped them. And it's not transactional. It's not let's do this so that, but it's let's do this. Also, when we do this, these are the folks that will say, you know what, when I needed something, the Democrats were the ones that came and helped me. And so we want to do it because it's the right thing to do. But that type of engagement is something that I think the average person doesn't experience from the party. And we can't thus expect them to just want to show up for us in March and November. Based on what? So that's what I would tell folks. Go to where they are. So social work's motto is you start where the client is. And so it's not enough to say, oh, meet us at this really awesome downtown brewery. We're talking about low propensity, low education voters. It's African-American voters in rural spaces. The idea that they're coming to your downtown brewery because democracy is on the line is simply folly. We need to go to them. At this point, we need to court them, and we need to go to the communities where they are, see where the needs are where they are, and do something programmatically to meet those needs, because it's just the right thing to do. So, and when you do it, please tell everybody the Democrats did that thing, please, because the Reds don't have any problem letting you know. This hate and vitriol brought to you by the
Republican Party.
There it is.
Absolutely. That is what a gem it is to have you here in the state and to have this. And don't you know, please believe that I'm going to be calling you so that we can get these things on the books for Polk County and model that for the Sand Hills.
Mm. Whenever you call, the answer will always be yes. So you let me know. You ain't nothing but a drive away. That is not a thing. I will say, when people endeavor to do these types of programmatic events, cultural competence and cultural sensitivity are vitally important. For example, I was telling you earlier that children in the foster care system overwhelmingly tend to be African American, and hair care products, you see what I was talking about before, hair care products for some folks, anything will work. Anything will work on my hair, but ethnic hair care products are necessary for a lot of these children. And it's important that if we're going to do a thing that is meant to meet a need, let's make sure that when possible and as necessary, we do so with an eye toward cultural sensitivity and awareness. Otherwise, it just looks like, oh, look, we gave you this. You're welcome. Democrats did it. Let's be very mindful and intentional. Let that be the word of 2024. Intentional.
That mindful and intentional. And when you start out from a place where it's wholesome and you're wanting to model the society that you want, these things will come naturally. There are things we have to learn, obviously.
Correct.
But when you're open to this, to doing this the right way, you'll make far fewer mistakes. Whereas if you're trying to be transactional, it's just not going to work. So that being so, we've laid out an incredible blueprint for, how it is we county parties can be more effective. I think sometimes being in a rural space can be challenging, but I've always approached, being in a rural space as an opportunity. What ways do you think that living in a small community, well, smallish, is growing every day, like Coke County, is, well, let me retract that question. You've been over here, you've seen our aquatic center, you see our 401 cuts through. What are some of the things, our county commissioners, our current county commissioners and county commissioner candidates can hang their hat on and continue to be doing? And how can we as a Democratic Party be elevating that?
Well, you all's aquatic center is amazing. I absolutely love it there. It is the most awesome. I remember watching it as they were building it, and I couldn't wait. And then when you were like, "Oh, our meeting is going to be in the," I was like, "Oh, that's awesome!" So that is definitely something to hang your hat on. It's such an amazing center. It has so many wonderful opportunities for adults and kids alike. It's very modern. Like more of that. It should actually be a blueprint for other counties to emulate. I tell you, a few times now I've had to go to the hospital. I have really, really bad asthma. I wound up in March of last year in the hospital for 4 days, 2 of them in the emergency room. They didn't know what was going on. I'm fine now, thank goodness. But I drove myself to you all's hospital because I knew that if I called an ambulance, I would have to go to the one on Owen Drive, and I wanted to go to you all's hospital. So, because the care that I've always received there, it was recommended to me once when I had to go. I think I stubbed a toe. We thought it might be broken or whatever. And they're like, "Oh, you should go to the one in Polk County." I'm like, all the way out there. And so I went, and the care was amazing. Modern everything was amazing. They came to the triage with the x-ray machine and stuck my foot on it and took the x-ray right there. And then when I was in the emergency room for what I thought was an asthma attack, turned out to be a bacterial lung infection, and they couldn't, to this day, we don't know how that happened, but it happened. But they had, first of all, there was constant round-the-clock care. Everybody's so, compassionate. And it was a very, very scary. I hadn't ever been that sick before. And so it was really scary, but people were amazing. And then on the second day in the emergency room, they wheeled in the PA, physician's assistant, on the big screen thing. And so she's giving directives to the nurse who's doing all the care, and she's typing it up right away. And it was amazing. And then when I got moved upstairs to my room, I spent 2 days in that room. Let me just say this. The food at Charles Hospital is amazing. And when I told nutrition services that the next time they brought me dinner, I got a double portion, I was like, oh
my goodness. That is so awesome.
But that's not something that you ever expect in a hospital, and it was worthy of comment. But by the time it was done, they had done an amazing job of giving me care, an amazing job of trying to figure out what the problem was. and making a very, very scary situation far and away less scary. So that's something that you should be happy about, because there are certain counties, like I believe it was Martin County, their hospital closed down. And
Exactly.
so, we need to have, and here we are celebrating the 14th anniversary of the Affordable Care Act, a year of having expanded Medicaid, and yet the number of places where folks can access that care are dwindling. And even when I was in that emergency room, on the board, they do a little dry erase board, and it said airlift to ICU. And I thought that was for me. And it was the patient before me, and the patient was fine, but they didn't take it off because they were just wheeling me into the room. But then I said, well, why would you have to airlift someone? Don't you have an ICU here? And they said, yeah, but it's understaffed. So they've had to shut it down. And so that means critical care would have to be airlifted all the way over to the Owen Drive Cape Fear Hospital. So that's a thing that we need to keep doing. So if you're like, well, what can they do? We can do more about that, about bringing the state legislature should send more money down to do what we need to do to reopen that facility. We can recruit really talented medical staff to come and reopen that ICU. So those are some things that can be done. And counties are responsible for a lot of things. So the school system, there's things we can do to modernize our school system and give our children a 21st century education so they can be ready for a 21st century global society, that sort of thing. And so there's a lot that can be done, but you also have a lot that you can hang your hat on, because I argue that health, which is also reflected in your aquatic center, recreation and community gathering, all of those things are vitally important for a community, and you have them well done, very well done.
It's a place, I lived for a long time in Fayetteville in Cumberland County myself, is no secret. And, the quality of life for my kids is just a touch, here better than where it was in West Fayetteville. No knock on West Fayetteville, that's where I grew up in the 80s and whatnot. And, I had a chance to come back there and stay in that space, until my grandfather passed away. But after that point, it started feeling empty as a community. And so I was able to hop over to County Line where my family lives here. And I'm just so happy here. And like you said, there's joy in that aquatic center because the recreation, the health piece is there. And that's what we have to embrace as a community. There's so much joy and opportunity as the space grows. So thank you for that. Tyson, the man, I'm glad you're back, buddy. The internet gods are capricious.
I'll save the last. Are you all able to hear me? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So, you hit on it there, but also in your previous answer, we have 2 days of action. We're doing some canvassing coming up on April 13th and April 27th. Daniel French, our regional director, helped set that up. He's the man. We'll have to have him on here soon enough. But, something that's been on my mind a lot recently is third-party candidates, people who are double haters, don't like Trump because of the insanity, but then worry about, Biden's age or unaware of his record, and that's going to have effects up and down the ballot. Well, I suppose not up, only down, because it's only down. But, it'll have effects down the ballot. And, those are people who are persuadable, I think. Those are not the people still waving MAGA flags, because we won't knock on those doors, won't waste the time. But what do you think we say to someone who I assume knows nothing about RFK Jr., because if they did and they are going to vote for him, well, that, again, not someone I'm going to spend time on. Right. But, the low propensity voter who, well, his name is Kennedy. He had an ad during the Super Bowl. Maybe I'm going to vote for Kennedy, and we'll see what happens down ballot. How do you think we highlight the accomplishments of Joe Biden, Garland Pierce? How do we frame that in a way that's useful and helpful to get those sort of voters back in the fold?
So the most important thing is you can't persuade without having information. And so when you're going to knock a door, you got to be able to speak against whatever the things are that they're saying that aren't accurate. You can't do that without information. And so training up your volunteer staff to know everything about that candidate or whomever, the third party candidate is going to be and the Republican candidate is vitally important. And also tangible talking points. And I say tangible because they have to be not written in Politico, right? The average person doesn't talk like this. The D trip All three of us know what I mean when I say that, but we
Unfortunately.
because the Dietrich is here, but I'm like, and I'm like, right, we're well, the DSCC or whatever, and we cannot speak. We have to speak English, right? We have to talk to people, not pollsters, if you will. And so if they know the information and they can translate that information into English for regular folks, then that's a good start. But the other thing is to ask them, like, because again, as a social worker, my first thing is always assessment. So I want to know, why are you contemplating voting for that candidate? Because there's either information that they don't know, or the information that they have is inaccurate, or they don't really understand that our society is not prepared, I believe, right now for a third party fund. The absolute infrastructure overhaul that would be necessary for viability for a third party candidate, it's simply not there. Neither is the desire for that. And so it always feels like a good idea to say, well, both of them are crazy, I'm going in the middle. There's no road there. There is no path to victory for a third party candidate. But generally speaking, these third party candidates are people on the left. And so all you're really doing is giving a ballot to the Republicans, because there is no viability for another President Kennedy right now. There's simply not. And so, these are folks who probably wanted to get on the debate stage in the primary under the Democratic ticket. They weren't able to muster enough support then. And so there's certainly no expectation that they would muster that support now. And so if you don't like Trump, then you just have to go with, but also I am over people being like, well, I don't like them. You don't know them. And so I don't need you, because see, we know the old adage, Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love. I need you to fall in love with the ability to continue to live in a society where you can say whatever it is that you want without fear of being, killed or incarcerated. I need you to fall in love with the idea of your children being able to get a really good education, and fall in love with the idea of not going bankrupt just because you got sick, because you worked 2 jobs to come up with a 40-hour-a-week check, and yet you do not have health insurance at either one of those things. Fall in love with the ability to make a challenging healthcare decision as a woman that has nothing to do with the law or policy, except that you can do it legally and safely. Because let me be really clear. We will never outlaw abortion. We will only outlaw legal and safe abortion.
Absolutely.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
We still did it. So fall in love with the freedom to make those kinds of decisions for yourself. Fall in love with the idea of a democracy that supports you and your family and your community. So I just had to riff on that for a second, because that drives me nuts.
I think it's a great point. Like, people are so critical.
I think it's an absolutely great
People
point.
are so critical on Joe Biden, and you just kind of look at them like, have you had your head in the sand for the last 4 years? I mean, a personal thing to me.
Right.
So I left school with an ROTC scholarship, and I had $25,000 in student loan debt. I paid $341 a month for 9 years until COVID. And then I got the pause or whatever. I still owe $15,000. And you know what Joe Biden did for me and for my family is he passed the safe income driven repayment plan. Oh, and mind you, I've had a service member relief cap on my interest. I had no interest while I was in Iraq, and I still owe $15,000. Joe Biden capped my payments with that repayment program. My payment's $18 now. So Joe Biden put $322 in my pocket every single month. I mean, it's such a, it's huge. It's huge for me and my family.
Because this is something, one of the things that William reached out to me about a couple of weeks ago was this narrative that's going around where people say, well, Trump gave me a check. Like, I don't have a problem voting for Trump because Trump gave me a check. First of all, Trump gave you no check because Trump right now is in need of many checks to pay all. I wish he could get that check back right now. But something. But when people hear that, it absolutely drives us insane because we know he gave you nothing. We know that it came because the sky was on fire during COVID. We know. They don't. What I hear when I hear that is somebody who remembers that somebody did something to help their family at their house. And so it's been almost 5 years since that check, 4 years since that check. And it was what, $1,500 or however much it was. But that was money that made a difference in people's lives. The money that you don't have to pay on that student loan is money that makes a tangible difference in your life. The ability for people to have access to Medicaid now makes a tangible difference in their life. And that's the sort of thing people need to see and be told, because there might be some people for whom debt relief from that is not necessarily going to mean anything. Maybe they didn't go to college. Maybe they paid their loans off. They were already on scholarship, whatever. But there are other tangible things. If you know someone who has diabetes now, who's a senior, that medication is $35 a month. And yet here we have, and because when Biden and Harris came to town the other day, we were up there with them in Raleigh, and they were talking about how the Republicans want to, pull that back. And all I could think was, how can you know that 400,000 more North Carolinians now have health care? And out of pure damn meanness, you want to take it away for nothing more than a political win. And to whom is that a win? I mean, I'm like, if you walk that back, I think you're going to lose, I don't know, about 400,000 voters who now are afraid to get sick, or their kid can't play sports, honey, because if you get a broken leg, mommy can't afford to get that taken. People driving themselves to the hospital because they are too worried about the ambulance bill.
That's right.
These are things they don't have to be concerned about now. And so when you're going out there, and they're like, oh, I'm going to vote for this third party person, remind them they are only taking votes away from the Democratic Party. There is no viable alternative for the two-party system that we have now. And if that's something people want in the future, that is an infrastructure overhaul that can start working on that now. But that's simply not going to happen for the long term. If they really believe in the issues, ask them, what are the issues that you believe in? And then they'll say, well, I care about X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Biden-Harris administration has done ABC about X, Y, Z, right? And so it is critically important that whoever you send out there is armed with that information in a very conversational way so that they can stand on that doorstep and say, that's not exactly right. That's right. Let me tell you what it really is. I had to do that in Anson County on Saturday of last week. I had a canvas out there. Daniel, our fabulous Piedmont Rod,
Daniel.
And we knocked on a door. They were listed as Democrats, registered as Dems, but the lady says, well, we're going to vote Republican. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, we had you listed in the system as a Democrat. She's like, yeah, we did that, but we're going to change that now. Now, the people I was with were ready to be like, all right, thank you. And I'm like, would you mind telling me why? And it's like, oh, I've got these issues. And I'm like, oh, what issues, And this woman is 88 years old, and she goes, abortion and immigration.
Oh, jeez.
I'm like, okay, if that isn't just the talking points, Lord, they just keep reading Expo News. And so we talked about immigration and how I said, believe it or not, the Democrats also care about immigration. And that's why there is a bipartisan immigration bill in Congress right now that gives the Republicans 80% of what they want and is actually going a little further than the Democrats were comfortable with. But because we care about this issue too, we are determined to get it signed. And the president has already said he would sign it. But Donald Trump has asked the Republicans not to put it forward because if we solve it now, it's a win for Biden and he has nothing to run on. And so she was like, well, he built part of that wall, and if he gets elected, they say he'll build more. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, he didn't do that. He refurbished some of the existing wall, but he didn't really build anything else. And so I talked about, because there had been this tussle at the border earlier the day before. And I said, you got it. She said, well, there's too many of them. She was like, there's too many of them. So I said, you got to imagine that if someone is willing to risk literally everything and travel on foot across one country to flee into another, they have to be leaving from something that's pretty substantial. And so I said, I think what we have more than an immigration crisis is a humanitarian crisis. And she's like, yeah, well, we're still just going to, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, what she'll never be able to say is nobody told me the truth. Now she willfully does what she's going to do.
Right.
So be it. But yeah, that's what I would say, Tyson, is if you're going to send folks out there, make sure they're armed with the information and they can convey that information in a way that makes sense for kitchen table conversations and not 30,000-foot conversations.
Well, and at the very least, you planted a seed.
That's,
the next time that she thinks about that, maybe she thinks, you know what, that is a good point. Like, no one's walking to the border because they're having a good time. These are desperate people trying to take care of themselves and their children. Maybe there is something to this. And, the Democrats are trying to do something, but of course Republicans are stopping. You're right. Like, that's how you persuade people.
Right.
Like, we're lucky in North Carolina that we're a 49 state. Those people doing God's work in the Wyoming Democratic Party are fighting a more uphill battle. But, that one person, she maybe changed her mind and maybe changed one friend's mind, and heck, that flips that county almost.
It could possibly work. I'm a gardener of people. I'm planting seeds.
I love that. Well,
what we found out when I was with the chair of Anson when I was doing my canvas, Danny Montgomery. I adore her, love her. Her son Derek is my county chair in Cumberland, and it became really clear to us as we were out. She says, "You know what? It seems to me that Republicans want to change people, and Democrats want to change things." And I told her if she didn't put that on a T-shirt and sell it for $10, I'd not do it. Because it's true. Because when we would go out, when we're doing these canvases, we are asking questions about issues, right? Right now, we're trying to sort of do a temperature check of the issues. And we would go places and all the Dems would say just one issue because they need to fix boom, 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 boom. And it was everything local. Also,
right.
It was local. But what you hear from this lady and a few others that we ran into, it was immigration and abortion. Honey, she is 88. This abortion issue is, it's still an important issue. I'm 52. It's still an important issue, but nevertheless, it's always an issue with somebody else. God forbid anyone in her family should ever need one for medical reasons, for life-saving reasons. Because you don't want to be the one that cast a ballot that cost them it all. But yeah, they want to change people, whereas Democrats want to change things. So just to put that out there.
Well, in this relatively blue county, we want to keep it that way. We work very hard, and that's why I asked the question about how do we move Hope County forward? How do we continue to step the things that we've accomplished, but at the same time, speak to people. And so I appreciate your words, your ideas. I'm going to be hanging on to every one of them because I know that no one can look away from the events that we're going to be having without saying they're really trying to make a difference. And it's just going to be impossible. So we're going to win because we're going to work. We're going to outwork folk. We're going to knock the doors. We're going to also have the cookouts. We're going to also have the free haircuts. We're going to also have the things that are going to make people happy.
Right.
Happy. I want joy as much. This doesn't have to be a life or death, a final battle. It doesn't have to be that kind of stress. We are just trying to make life better for everyone. And we believe it.
I love that because when you said that we can be happy, that's the thing. Like it blows my mind that people on the right now, like we have a federal judge whose daughter was named by Trump and defamed by her. And that judge is so probably very afraid that something will happen to him or his daughter, that he did not take the sort of hard-nosed stance against that in the courtroom that he needed to. And any of the rest of us would have done it. We'd be in jail thinking about what we just did because that is a threat. But when your only response to losing or to bad press or to getting your feelings hurt is to go violent, I don't understand that. But here's the thing, and I want everybody to hear this. People need something to vote for, not something to vote against. So
That's
when
right.
you're thinking about, oh, well, I don't need to, worry about Trump because no one would vote for him. I want you to remember that Mark Robinson got 600,000 votes in the primary. Whenever said, oh, that Republican woman that did the response to the State of the Union, she was nuts. She wasn't talking to us. There was a base, there was an audience for that creepy message that she gave, right? When we think about the Republican candidate for school superintendent, oh, wow, she's crazy. No one would ever vote for her. And yet she unseated the incumbent. So there is a base out there. And he's
That's right. That's right.
And he was no less out of his mind then. And so, and the thing is he's dangerous. I believe that, but I think he's also capable of being disciplined. See, what's going to happen is he's going to go into some of these communities where he has they don't have really any idea, because, not to disparage the office of lieutenant governor, but the average person doesn't need to know what the lieutenant governor is doing day to day. And so his name recognition is only going to come from him running right now. And so he's not going to have any sort of policy thing to run on. So he's going to go to some little black church down east and go, I was your first black lieutenant governor. I'll be your first black governor. I'm just a country boy like you. I graduated from Central. He's going to have all the right stuff for that crowd. Then he's going to do that anti-abortion stuff to a different crowd, and sometimes maybe to the same crowd. And so if they don't know what we know, then he might be able to persuade some of these folks based on phenotype or whatever sort of related thing, right? So we have to make sure NCDP has a website, and on the website at the very top it says, meet the real Mark Robinson. Do you know how invested I have to be in knowing who he is to go to that website? If I'm already on that website, I already know the real Mark. Right?
I already know.
No. And so it's our responsibility to get folks out there and say, listen, all they're asking you to do is vote against. All they have, if I don't win, it'll be a bloodbath. So, but if we win, if we win, you get expanded access to this. You get more of that stage, right? We can continue in this trajectory that we've already established as the most consequential president that we've ever had. So
that's right.
We have to, I like your message of hope, William. I really do, because folks need something. They're tired of the divisiveness. They're tired of the fighting. They think they're crazy on both sides. Let them know that we are crazy in love with the idea of them living the life of their dreams.
Well,
for us, we can give them that. So
say that one more time. We're crazy. Say that one more time. God, cut you off.
And we are crazy about giving them the life of their dreams.
That's right.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Wow. I don't think we could top that. Audience, thank you so much, Dr. Kimberly Hardy. Thank you so much, Tyson. Man, thank you for your incredible questions. We are looking forward to a fantastic campaign. We're saying these things now in March, and what I believe is that we will be able to implement them and win, because these are the messages we've got to get out now. Thank you all so much for joining us at the Hope News podcast. Until next time, see you later.
Bye.
All right.